Okay, I have no actual idea how well this is going to work. It's been a very long time since I've done any kind of Twitch stream, but I'm back in Louisiana for the winter. My internet is cooperating for once, so I figured why not start a new Dungeons, Dragons, and Space Shuttles world. So, yeah. I just realized that this is probably gonna... You would start me off in a snow biome, wouldn't you? Um, with an actual temple. Yeah, it's gonna pick up every single sound my keyboard makes. Let me see if I can fix that at all. No, it's still gonna pick them up. Okay, of course. Drawback to having a loud keyboard is that's gonna pick up everything. Hello, Mr. Chameleon. You know, with having the snow right there in an astral temple, could I could make this work. Maybe. Possibly. Hmm. Well, that's how me. AC. That. There we go. Um. Excuse me, pig. Thank you. Yeah, I could make this work. Let's see. Yeah, it's not that bad. Can I please get out of the water? Thank you. Jeez. Let me shift that to right there. I need a new mic so bad. Because my current one is a piece of junk. I mean, it's not entirely a piece of junk, but it definitely has seen better days. So I could do that. Actually, I could build into the mountain right over there where that dirt is. Because why make it more challenging on myself than this pack is already gonna be? Interesting. That's a problem for future me. Because I could do that, or I could just keep searching. The only thing I have cheats on for is so I don't have the 5-second cooldown when it comes to teleporting. I couldn't think of the word. Think of the word teleporting. Get that. In the meantime, you know, I think I might go adventuring for a better spot. But also at the same time, I know I can break this dirt to do all these jumps. You know what? Yeah, breaking dirt. Get the dirt collection going. Not gonna pass up the fact there's cotton. So that's gonna come in handy later. Is that a little bit? thought there was a little bit more, but I guess not. Let's see. I don't want to be underneath the slime island. I know that one for that much for a fact. Be nice if there was a village nearby. But I don't believe I'll get that lucky. Gonna need that eventually, might as well grab it. Didn't intend to land in the water right there, but... So did you just like spawn me on a whole bunch of little series of islands? Because if so, I don't like that, and I think it's very rude. Mostly because it makes it harder to go find things. I'm not messing with a dragon. I can tell you that much right now. Not messing with that. We're just gonna go around the far side of it. Oh. Here's to hoping it doesn't notice me. Way over here. Definitely not gonna build my house by the dragon. That's a no-no. Slime Island. Is that just a whole bunch of hay? Ow. Of course I'd fall. I always fall. Don't mind if I do. It's free hay. This is always the longest part of, I think, any Minecraft game, whether you're playing modded or not, is just where to settle. Still a little too close to that dragon for my liking to hit here, but... So much as I like this. This is kind of nice. More rice. Don't mind if I do. Ah! That thing actually just scared me. Like, I'm not saying that entirely freaked me out, but that entirely freaked me out. Kiss that elves back down there. Just go back over this way a little bit. Love that I'm wasting daylight, but it is a sacrifice that has to be made. I really am going to collect as much rice as possible, though, because it's a good food source. I like a seed. Cabbage seeds. Don't mind if I do. There's just like a ravine over here or something. There's some hops. Ooh. I will admit this is a nice little area. It would just be better if it had like a village or something, but the sun's getting low. I suppose I could always just RTP once it becomes daylight again, because I feel like doing it at the onset of night is not a good idea. But go RTP. And it puts me in water. Thank you. Lovely. Yes, thank you. What do you mean object successfully summoned? Yeah, I'm not going that way. Suppose I could hang out in the sand dunes for the night. Bunny rabbit. Don't have an enemy, and please, do you have a bed? Oh, of course you're empty, you stupid. That's not fair. Oh, there's skeleton horses there. I feel like I shouldn't be here. I feel like that could go bad. Gonna run my way through the night. This would be the prime opportunity to have a horse that doesn't have a name tag and listen to America's Horse with No Name. Because I will have been to a desert on Horse with No Name. But I'm probably gonna die while I'm here, so you know. Anyway, we are gonna go up this hill. This is not gonna end well. And by not ending well, it means I'm probably gonna die. It's... Yeah, go away. Nobody wants you here, Mr. Spider. Oh, not good. Okay, mistakes have been made. I will openly admit that mistakes have been made, and I did not think this through. And honestly, this is probably going to lead to some form of certain death, maybe. It's just, I ran out of stuff. Alright. Okay, so, let's do that. Okay. There's certain death beneath me, but I've avoided certain death long enough to regroup. Okay, this... Okay, let's do that. Get the 2 checkbox quests out of the way. Okay, so yeah, 5 wood, 2 sticks. which neither of which I can get until morning. But I'm safe until morning. So I can, let's see. Now, I'm in the middle of the desert because I didn't think this through. Huh. I have plenty of rice seeds, though. That's a plus, I guess. So, hay. Yeah. Got hay, sugar cane. What's else in it? Integrated tones? Oh, I've never actually looked at the Akashic Tome. No matter how many packs I play, I never look at it. I always forget to. Yes, cotton. I don't eat this stuff on. The backpack there. Okay. Ooh. I'm not doing that again. I don't like that he did that. I don't feel like running for it. Oh my. Can I hit you? Can I hit you from here? Oh. Be cool if I could. Would actually be pretty intense if I could hit him there, but excuse me, sir. I forgot this game does that around Halloween. Which also reminds me that Halloween is just right around the corner. So that's a thing. I really have nothing that I can do until morning. So, like, I don't know. I can have a panda rave. Silent panda rave, technically, but panda rave nonetheless. Make him headbang. I may just RTP again in the morning, you know? Well, because I don't want to do it in the middle of the night. Because it could maybe work in my favor, but it would probably not work in my favor. And I really don't feel like dying before even setting up a home base. But on the other hand, if I RTP, I could maybe manage to find a village. Or a better shelter. Can you shut up out there? Nobody asked for your opinion. Like, nobody asked, Ghosty. Okay, you know what? We're going for it. Going for a nighttime RTP. Is this smart? No. Am I gonna die? Probably. Or it'll just put me on a... Ooh. It's being a tiny little island. There's gonna be things that can kill me on this island. I already know it. Yeah, thank you. Why can't... Oh my god, the hitbox on these things. There we go. Oh hey, free pickaxe. Free pickaxe. Okay, I'm gonna just kinda okay, so it is sunrise plus but I think I might have to RTP again because I'm on an island in the middle of the ocean, and that is not conducive to finding a place to live at all. So I suppose I could just loot this little mini temple here, see what's in its chest, take down some trees so I have some wood, and then I think I can just venture on. Get dirt with me. Let me see, there's this, if I'm correct, yep, that's the corner with the box. What did I just see moving? What is moving over there? Is this something that wants to kill me? Thank you for the sub. I don't know why I said it like that, but you know, it's a thing. It's a thing, and I have to live with it now. Bronze, iron, diamond, bone, garlic. Do I have the room to be taking all this stuff? No. Am I gonna take it all anyways? Yes. Also take that chest. What was walking, or what is that? Why is there a spider web? Why is there a spider web? Why is... Ah! Nope, 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 nope. Just gonna casually RTP my way out of there really fast. Oh look, I'm not on an island. Well, I may be on an island, but I'm not on an island in the middle of nowhere. What are you summoning? What is the... What are you summoning? Like, do I wanna know? Mangoes! I'm not gonna get any for cutting the tree down, but I need the wood. Boom. Boom. I have those, thank you. Passion fruit. Peaches. Even in dire need of wood, I will not touch acacia wood. Don't like... What are you summoning? Game. You can't just go object successfully summoned and not tell me what you're summoning. That's not how this works. Like, that's not how any of this works. Can I get the stone pickaxe? Yes, I can. I'm gonna grab some copper ore. One little measly ore. Grab dirt. Turn my way up. Boom, boom, boing, boing, boing. I'm trying to... It made a noise I didn't like. What? There's ferrets in here? What the? Look at his nose! Oh my god, you're so cute. No, don't leave me. Don't leave me. You're so cute. Look at you. You're just a long boy. Like a long boy. I need to stop getting distracted and actually find a spot to settle down. Okay. Just gonna do that. Clear up some inventory room. I'm gonna grab this olive wood, the olive seeds. Not seeds, just the olives and the olive saplings. I do know how to speak, but... Did you seriously just... Thank you. I appreciate that. I feel special. How are you doing today? Have you rested? Have you had water? Have you, laughed at my poor misfortune in this game yet? Because it only gets worse from here. I really don't want acacia wood. And I don't want to keep using my pickaxe, because my pickaxe is gonna break. Let's say, oh yeah, also with subbing, you get a cute little icon that has, it's a bunny, and it's like just a generic bunny, but it's bunny, because it's for Thumper, who is completely ignoring me today, by the way. He's like, nah, want nothing to do with me. And I don't know what I did to him besides, you know, make him travel all summer. What's this? Red sand. I want to find a village. I want to live by a village. Ooh, what? Tell me about the smoothie. I'm starting a new world in Dungeons, Dragons, and Space Shuttles. Because I like torturing myself with expansive quests. And many of them. And, you know, blood moons. Which are technically the bane of my existence. But they make life interesting. Just gonna bounce my way up here. Is that cold? Jump, 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 jump. Espresso smoothie with butter pecan ice cream. I don't know where I thought you were gonna go with smoothie, but espresso smoothie with butter pecan ice cream and bananas was not. I did not think any of those were gonna be in like one thing, and now I kind of want to try it, and I feel like I should text my stepdad and my mom to see if they can pick up some butter pecan ice cream at the store, because all that does sound really good. Might as well get some stone. Okay, no, stop getting distracted with picking up things and... Okay, it's over this way to more green. My asthma has been giving me issues the past like 3 days. It's been insane, and because it always makes me want to cough. I hate this. I'm just gonna RTP again. That is a weird combo. No, I'm not gonna lie, you're right there. That is weird, but there's also been weirder that I've seen. I've probably tried weirder as well, but never like, you know. You know what? I'm gonna need some of this eventually, so I might as well. Ooh, free meat. Can I please find a village? Like, can like a village just pop up here somewhere? To where, like, preferably one that has like an immersive engineering house, so I can swipe the crates for more storage. But also, if it's a village in a good enough spot, maybe I'll just live there. Just gonna grab all this copper as I see it, because gonna need it. Gonna need it so much. I'm currently drinking coffee and milk in the way that it is a cold brew concentrate of a pumpkin spice coffee, and instead of adding water to it, I just added milk to it. So if my body doesn't hate coffee how it is, I also added the dairy, so I clearly hate myself. But it's caffeine, it's good, and it feels good in my throat, so that outweighs the negatives there. I always forget to talk. I either always forget to talk or end up talking like way too much. There's no middle ground whatsoever. Exactly, it's worth the pain when the drink is good. But that's like still I don't think I drank it like that. Ooh, I can't reach it because it's way behind me. Um, let me do this. So, this stuff right here, I wonder if it'll, like, zoom in on it. It's Black Rifle Coffee Company, and it is a mocha flavored, it's a triple shot espresso coffee drink. And I'm normally a person that is not sensitive to caffeine, but then I get a 300 milligrams of espresso in me, and it turns out that I am very sensitive to caffeine. But it does not stop me. Why are there, like, no villages? I just want a village. I want a village that doesn't have, like, a dragon or anything by it, because I'm nowhere near ready for the dragons. Thank you. Let's see. Make sure that wasn't something chasing me that I heard. I highly recommend them. I randomly tried one, I think when I was in Salt Lake City, because it was like, they were, you know, everywhere, because I guess the Black Rifle Coffee Company is based in Salt Lake City, but it's a veteran-owned coffee company, and they have some of the best coffee that I have ever had. I've had a lot of coffee. It's turning night again. I don't want to die. I'm gonna dig myself a hole in the ground. I mean, technically I do have some wood on me, so I can get some stuff going, but yeah, let me see if I can get out of it. Nope. You know what? Do. Anyways, let's see if I do that. I can make myself some torches. Put one there so I got some light. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna crack this one open right now, because why not? It's always a good time for coffee. Okay, now. I broke that open the wrong way. I'm gonna go this way. Yeah, there's some stuffs. What do I get for this? Okay. Oh, sticks. There we go. Okay, crafting station, wood pickaxe, wooden shovel. There's the crafting station. I hate that this, dang it. It always feels like such a waste of wood at the start when I have to use, when I don't have the stuff to, like, double up, so I just have the friggin', it's like, you get 2 sticks or 2 planks instead of 4 each. Did I get a wooden sword? Ah, yes. Dirt, cobble, sand, clay, gravel. Whatever ghost is making that noise, can you please shut up? Like, go, I don't even know if I don't even know if my computer audio picks it up. But, like, there's, like, this, like, ghost thing that just keeps going, like, Yes. Yes, there are actual dragons in this mod pack. And they are mean. Really good loot. And I've actually found that if you don't have the means to fight a dragon, it is actually possible to kind of, like, dig your way underneath their lair and loot the chests from the bottom. But I do not guarantee success on that. But yeah, if it's a big mod pack, it has like over 300 mods in it, I think. But it's one that I've been playing consistently for like almost 3 years now, I think. So it is it's definitely up there on my list of things like, yeah. I always recommend it. It's one of my favorites. As frustrating as it can get. Because like it has dragons, it's got dungeons. It's got 2 different kinds of dungeons. There are come on, brain. There's pirate ships. There is obviously eventually space shuttles. I've never actually played through it enough to get to the space shuttle portion. But there's also blood moons. And I don't like the blood moons. But they're really good for going underground and mining and stuff because everything's spawning on the surface. So there's almost no enemies underground. But I'm gonna text my mom and stepdad and see. What did I say about that ghost and needing to shut up? Like, it doesn't listen, apparently. But no, I'm gonna text my mom and stepdad and see if they can bring Whataburger home for dinner, because some Whataburger sounds like really good. That. Ow. I've been avoiding an email from my advisor at school because I'm currently getting an F in social psychology. So should I really be sitting here streaming when I could be doing my homework? Probably not, but it's the first time all summer, technically almost all year, that I've had decent enough internet. Can this pickaxe just break so I can justify making a stone one, please? Well, a new stone one. Okay, let me see. I can get that out of there. I need some foods. Really? The drawback to holding the torches. How I do is that happens a lot. I'm gonna eat a garlic mallow berry. Because this pack also has a thing where the more you eat different variations of foods, like how it'll say like eaten, not yet eaten. The more variety of foods that you eat, you actually like start to gain hearts. Oh, yeah, I got a sword. Is it sunrise yet? I want to go find a place to live. Or a village. Or both. Because I don't think I've ever played better Minecraft. Like, this one is one of my favorites. I really like Sky Factory 4, Stone Block 2. I kind of play a lot of the mod packs I play are version 112. Because I don't like the newer versions of Minecraft as much when it comes to the mods that are available for them. Is it almost daylight yet? I want out. I want freedom. Yes, sunrise. Let me not do that. Let me take this. I get my sword out. Gonna have a sandwich. And I'm gonna start running this way. I also forgot what shader pack I have on here, but I love the fact that when you have a torch, like in your hand or even in your offhand, it will... Nobody wants you here, Ghost! But, when you have a torch in your hand or offhand, it actually, like, lights up the area around you. There's a hippogriff. Yeah, the ghost says hello about every few minutes. It's just like, it's like, just made that noise and I got a very judgmental look from the rabbit. Looking over at me like, what are you doing? And I'm like, none of your rabbit business. How much inventory space do I have? There we go. Okay, this is a nice, flat, open area. The only thing that would make this area better is if there was a village. But I don't think there is one. But also, however, down here, it looks like there'd be a nice little spot by the water. It would probably be very nice for a base. Not for the exception of Death Tower over there. I need to stop running when I'm this low on food. I'm so sorry, but like... Why did you have to fall down there? Anyways. Of course, he had to make it difficult to get some wool. I am so out of inventory space. Do I have anything else I can put up in my backpack? No? Well, I don't need that right now. So that can go there. I don't even care about that. Don't need that. So that goes up there. Come here, I need your wool. No, come back. Get. Why are you so fast? Sheesh. There we go. Yes, man. Bro. There's a freaking village right here. Ain't no way you said manifesting a village, and I turn. And there's a village. It's got enemies in it. Oh my god. Oh no, this is a bad village. Bad right now. Why is it full of monsters? Don't kill everybody in here, please. Oh my god. There's like one villager that survived. And he's like way over there. Why are there so many enemies here? My stepdad said we'll see to Whataburger. So, manifest me some Whataburger since the village thing worked so quickly too. I had to cough. And it hurt. Ow. But yeah, there's one villager survived, I guess. Well, it doesn't have the one thing I was actually like looking for, which was the immersive engineering. But take this. Let me see. I don't need that yet. I don't need to worry about that yet. I want the rubber sapling and the rubber wood. How'd you get stuck in there like that, buddy? Look at this. There's like... Ooh, I'll take the scoop. It's a scoop. So yeah, from the looks of it, there's just this one dude just standing out. Why are they not attacking you, dude? If they're like right there. Is it because you're a druid? 8 beats for an emerald. You get 8 beats right over there. Oh, that's funny. Are you like stuck in there? Oh, there's one alive in there too. What is happening? Ah, oh, no, 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 no. You know what? That was very rude of you to smack me like that. And I don't think this village is a safe place for me. Like, I am just, yeah. They got there fast. What the heck? Okay, you know what? You know, we're gonna randomly teleport again after I kill this guy. Hey, I need your wool. Why? Why are you so fast? No, don't go towards them. I'm trying to kill you so I can need your wool. Thank you. Okay. This is exactly why I turned cheats on and made it so turn cheats on so I don't have to deal with the 5-second cooldown for the teleporting, because otherwise I would have just died waiting to teleport, and that's not good. Get in some coal. Like, there's an astral sorcery temple, like, right there, and I don't even want to bother looting it, because I don't have room to hold anything. Ooh, more coal. Get all the coal. Get all the coal. More coal! Let's see. I don't feel like going into a forest, so I think I'm gonna head this way and just kind of... Okay, my copper ore is still in my inventory there, so let's grab that. Except let's do it with a stone pickaxe, so I actually get it. Why are y'all so fast when I mean, besides the fact that I'm like trying to kill you? Because I suppose I would run pretty fast too if somebody was coming after me with a sword. But that's completely beside the point. Okay, get rid of the sap for right now. And get rid of the tea seed for right now. Hi, I'm gonna kill you too. Just because I'm gonna need wool. Game. Don't for yourself, thank you. Llamas. I'm not gonna pass up coal. It's another one of those things that I know I'm gonna eventually need a large amount of. I guess I tried to break coal with berries. Bing, bing, bing. Oh, baby llama! Look at you, look so stupid. Look at it, I love it. Oh my god, you're so stupid looking. Why is your neck so big? Oh, look at you. Oh, love ya. You get to live. I really wish my keyboard wouldn't, like... Sometimes it picks up the noise when you're clicky-clacking, and sometimes it doesn't. Okay. Now, my question is it just like dark because it's raining? Or is it about to get nighttime on me again? Because I have an idea. It's about to get nighttime again. This. That. Can I just use, like... Yeah. Nighttime is no longer an issue. Unless it becomes a blood moon, in which case then it's going to be a big issue. Gotta wait until 10:27. Sleep. Go sleep. Okay. New day. Continue the adventure, looking for a place to call home. Really? I don't want to go up. This is soapstone. You know, while I had my crafting station down, I probably... Yeah, the blood moon is freaking terrifying. The blood moon scares me. Like, there are not many things in this world that scare me, but the blood moon is one of them. Blood moon is just frightening because it's like, it just like ups the enemy spawn count, and like there's so many of them. Pumpkins? Just gonna stare my way down so I can also get this coal. But I'm good. Do I have, okay, I do got room for pumpkins. I got one spot open and it's gonna be pumpkins. After I get all this coal. Because eventually I'm gonna need it to power my furnaces, and to make torches, and to make sandy coal compounds, to make silicone and glue. Well, let's make silicone. Yeah. Silicone. Ow. Pumpkins. Look at all the pumpkins. Don't mind if I do. I'm gonna take them all. Bam. Okay. Now that I got sufficiently distracted grabbing all those pumpkins, what am I gonna do with 19 pumpkins? I don't know yet, but I have them if I need them. I don't want to go through all these trees. I don't want to jump. I'm tired of jumping. Splash. Okay, this. What if go... See, I'm not as, like, concerned with all this walking around now that I have a bed. Because then I can just slap it down and skip the night. Let's go north. Ow. But now, like, being back in Louisiana, the humidity, where it's, you know, it's like anywhere between 95% and 100% humidity every day in, day out, even at night. It's like that, and My asthma does not like that. Village! There's a village! It fell out of a tree. But there's a village. Does it have the building I want? Ooh, this is a nice village. Oh my gosh, you're gorgeous. Yeah. But do you have what I need from you? Oh, I've got... Even though I can't take anything from you yet. Because I don't have the storage room. Okay, please have... How is it that I found... Yeah, I definitely prefer dry heat. When I was up in Utah over the summer, like, yeah, it was over 100 degrees, like, almost every single day we were there. But I could breathe. And I've been relying on my new inhaler. Matter of fact. But the only thing that, like, stops my coughing at this point is my inhaler. So it's like, get that taken care of. Okay, now, how is it that I found two villages, and neither of them have had the immersive engineering house? So I can get some free storage. And I hate that this one doesn't have it. Dude, Vegas is like a whole nother level. Vegas heat freaks me out. I have a friend that lives there, and I'm like, I don't know how you can handle that full time. I guess, you know, with being raised there, it's easier. But no, because I remember when I lived in Michigan, there were times where it's like 95 degrees with like 90% humidity, and I was too poor to run the air conditioning. So I'm sitting there with a fan on me, and that's when all four cats really wanted to snuggle. Okay. I'm disappointed in this village. Time to evaluate what I have. I can get more. I know I'll get more of that. Get more seeds. That stays. That stays. I don't care about that. Find more of those. Find more of those. That go up there. I'll put that up there. It hurts to cough, man. Like, coughing hurts. Give me 1 second. I realize that, like, there's somebody that I know that has been super helpful in my journey with this mod pack, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna let them know that I'm actually alive. Okay, so now what can I grab out of this? I want the iron plate, I want the copper. That's about to disappear super fast. So is that. So just eat those. And then I want that. And I am. Well, actually, I don't need those. But I also don't care about the rest of that stuff right now. I will find more of it later. See something? I'm gonna put that there, and that right there, so I can continue to collect more rice and rice seeds. You know what? Our tips. At least it didn't set me in water this time. Just go pack and clean and stuff, and I will probably bug you on Discord later, and I will let you know how the game goes. And honestly, I'll probably throw you a YouTube link tomorrow because I plan on saving the stream and uploading it onto my YouTube channel so my nephew can watch it. So, but yes, go do stuff, and thank you for the sub, and thank you for the bits. And now let's go find, and then for being good luck with finding villages too, now that I think about it. I think that might have been her yell, like a squeal. Wait, it's like mini haunts. I'll do like the Taylor Swift heart. Because my hands just look weird when I do this one, especially if my face is behind them. Boing, boing. I don't care about the coarse dirt. Nyong. I want a village with an immersive engineering house. Please. Well, I know it's not a village, but maybe it'll have some good loot. Although if I walk all the way over there and this is one of them that doesn't give me a chest, I'm gonna be really mad. Because that happens to me more than I would like to admit. Oh, this is a nice little area, though. Could always set up a home base here. Ooh, it does have chests. But also a seep. Let's see, what do you got? I really have no point. Alright, what can we get rid of? Don't care about those right now. And more of those. Get more of that. And get more of that. Okay, good enough. Because I want that. I want that. I want that. Okay, wonderful. Nope, just up in chest. That one hiding. Okay. Ow. A pirate ship way out there. It probably really wouldn't hurt to find it somewhere and just throw a chest down. But I'm also so indecisive, and I don't want to settle too early. But I also want to settle and at least have some walls up before the first blood moon happens to appear. Yeah, the brain slimes. No, you cannot catch me. Nope. Nope, 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 nope. Yeah, that's what I thought. Faster than you. Where am I going back the way I came? What the? Okay, I need to go this way. If I go this way. That's not the button I wanted to hit. I clearly am struggling with what I'm doing. Take those. Okay. Going this way. Although it looks like there's just going to be water. Unless this little stretch here leads to more than just island. This is ridiculous. However, there's a dungeon and a pirate ship. More land. Okay. Let's see how this goes. Not gonna mess with that just yet, because I don't have the inventory space. Oh look. Water. But I will grab that copper. So grab. I forgot that I have the saltpeter ore up in. There we go. Oh, better. I'm gonna have to make a new pickaxe here in a second. Rice. And a chicken. Chicken and rice. I am hungry. Wow. Boing, boing, boing. Ah, I might RTP just cause. Let's see, RTP. Don't drop me in water. Dropping me on the side of a snowy mountain is, I guess it's better than water. This is not helpful at all. Don't like when it spawns me by big bodies of water, because there's always a chance that there's going to be a sea serpent. Should maybe not be by the big gaping hole. Might be bad. Oof. Ow, I missed. Trying to jump around a corner, and it didn't work. Okay, let's go up. Up and over. Over the river and through the woods. To find a village I go. After I stop and grab this coal. And after I eat my last leafy chicken sandwich to make room to grab the iron ore. Hey, thank you. Okay. Don't mind if I do. Let's do that. And just for the sake of my sanity, so I don't keep using my expensive one. I say as I literally break something with that one. Okay. On the road again. There's lava setting the forest on fire over there. That's not safe. Splash. Oh, look at that. There's a certain death dungeon to my left. And probably something even worse to my right. Let me do this. Whee! Yeah, little red dots appearing. I'm not gonna mess with it. Let's run across the, no, it's gonna be, I think it'll be this corner? It's gonna be this corner. Whoa, Ivy. What the? Okay then. Really? Okay then. I guess I'm not getting anything from that. Be that way then. Just a little panda running through the snow. Whee! Love watching my shadow. So, you got any chests? You got chests? Really? You're rip. Aim. Hi, Tomper, I see you. Let's go see what's up over the hill. Get out of the snow. Get out of the snow, get into the green. Boing, 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 boing. Gonna stop in a second, slap the bed down for the night. Really? Ow. I did not mean to cough that close to my microphone. Okay. Let's see. What if I go this way a little? Puppies. Hello, puppies. I still have those bones. Damn. Psst. Hey, one bone. One bone. You three are coming with me. Come on. There you go. Now I got a crew. I got backup. I'm not messing with that tower. Oh, jeez, that scared me. This is not a successful adventure. Like, I'm just trying to find somewhere to make a home, put down some roots. And it's like, I've been playing for like an hour. And I haven't found anything yet. There's gotta be something. Like, I found 2 villages, but no immersive engineering house, so the villages aren't worth it for me. What? RTP. Give it a second to load in. See. Actually, let's go this way. Yeah, this way. This is the way I want to go. Making sure that it's still working nicely. Hello, puppies. Wait a minute, did I lose my puppies by teleporting? Did I not think that through? Or have they just not decided to follow me yet? You know, maybe I shouldn't have come this way. Wait, let's go this way now. Bonk. Boing. I love the way the shader pack makes stuff look underwater. Yeah, I'm not dealing with that tower. I feel like that tower would kill me. Why is it so hard to just find somewhere to settle down? I mean, if I can find a good water source to build by, this could work. A whole lot of grass. That's a lot of those. Oh, the drawback is the slime island right there. So I was about to be, ooh, this would be a nice little shoreline here. But it's got that slime island, and I don't want to build by the slime island. You look at that bumper. Village, 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 village. Please. Oh, hello. I'm gonna keep that in mind. Ow. Oh, and it has an immersive engineering thing, imager. Wow, berries. This is gonna be the village I call home. Oh yeah. It's all coming together. Actually, first off, let me do this. Nyum. Worry about the rest of the stuff later. Oh, please don't have my stuff where the... No, it took the... It ripped me off of a chest. Although, while it may have ripped me off of a chest, it's still a very nice area. Now, the question is, how do I want to go about building my house here? Okay, like, I really do suck at building. It's like, taking over one of the structures here would probably not be a bad idea. And then I could start utilizing each of the other buildings for specific things. You know what? I think that's what I'll do. I think I'm going to claim this house right here as mine. Yeah, this one. Except I'm going to need y'all to get out. Actually, you know what? Simply because of that, I'm going to protect the village. My friend just gave me an idea. And my friend sent me a message on Discord saying that they wanted to live with, like, finding a village and build a mini kingdom around it. And I think I'm about to steal that idea from her. I'm gonna tear that down eventually. Yeah, like, imagine. It's far enough away from that slime island over there. Right here, this little area. Yeah. This is gonna be where it's at. This will be home. And I'm gonna use... I'm gonna set this as the world spawn just for future reference. My goals are beyond your understanding. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna put everything in. Let's do this. That. Okay, make sure nothing else would fit in there. That. That. Okay. There we go. We got a nice little area. Clean this up a little bit. And eventually, like, I could probably put, like, a wall of protection around the village. way I don't lose any villagers. Okay. Ooh, Ender Lily. Ooh, perfect spot to make a little way down. Just gonna torch this up first. Okay, cause yeah, so this is gonna be the level I break it down to. A rabbit is sitting in his litter box just staring at me, and for some strange reason, it's just the most amusing thing when a rabbit looks at you, like, straight on, with their eyes being on the side of their head, just like two little dots. Just thought about the fact that I'm gonna need to... Okay, so I do have some more torches. Wood. Coal. No torches because... I'm gonna turn my light levels on for a second. Purely to slap some of these down and give myself a nice illuminated area. There we go. Just gotta fill in some gaps. Okay, so what did I put? There's my stone. No, you know, let's do that. Make a couple stone shovels. And really fast, I'm gonna go gather some sand and gravel. Bam, 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 bam. Oh, that was a little preemptive bam there. Let's see, so got more than enough of that. Let's... Really? You're gonna look stupid like that? Of course you are. Because why would you look nice? Huh? Let's see. Okay, how many... Okay. I just need to find some clay. It shouldn't be too hard. Sand, salt. Sand and salt. Don't play it. Surely there has to be some clay. Haha. Clay, please. I'm not ready to drown for it. There we go. Oh, how pretty that looks. Love it. Okay, so got that, and I think I'm gonna take the clay. So I'm gonna make stone sword, stone hoe, sword hoe. That, and then the furnace. That. Then I can do this. Let's make our AIoT. Love the AIoT. Ow. That one hurt my throat. Like, not gonna lie, that one hurt. Not a fan. Okay. Finish flattening this out. I'll give us a nice little, good little starting area, I think. It's gonna bug me if I don't do this. There we go. Do that. Just gonna. Okay, let's see. Let's see. Extra AIoT. I don't have to worry about the charcoal and stuff, but I can go chop down trees. Eventually, I think I might use the berry bushes that grow 3 high. Not just protect my little area here, but I think I might put them around the village too. Just to make sure it's as safe as possible. I kept seeing if I can there's this little place here in Scott, Louisiana, in the Lafayette area, called Super Taters, and they do, like, if you want a baked potato anyway, they do it, and it is fantastic. And I guess that's what we're getting for dinner. So this. Okay, that now. I want to take this stuff out of this, but I want to like tear this thing down. Like I want to tear this little structure down and just keep everything that's in it for myself. So that's what I'm about to work on. Because, like, you know, it's free materials. And who doesn't love free materials? Really? Sometimes this game hates me. Most times this game hates me. I mean, hey, and I'm getting some free wool out of the deal, too. What am I going to do with extra beds? I don't know, but I suppose I could use them for traveling. Just always have a spare bed with me, maybe. But yeah, I'm going to tear this little structure down, just so it doesn't get into my way. Still mad that that meteorite spawned in, like, right where the chest in the blacksmith building is. I do love this AIoT. Like, just being able to just do everything with one without having to, like, switch tools is fantastic. And hold on, because I just got asked which potato from Super Tater I want, and I have to look this up. Super Taters and more. Where's your menu? The menu. There we go. Oh, they got broccoli and cheese soup. Well, I'm sitting here like, oh yeah, I guess I'll just... do have a lot of stuff. But, okay, here we go. Super-sized taters. Ooh, butter, 3 times the bacon, cheddar cheese, cheesy sauce, and chives? Oh, they got a crawfish one. Forgot. That's right. I'm like back down south. I'm back down south. I can get my crawfish again. Okay, this. Let me text this really quickly. And I hope nothing comes along in the game and tries to, like, unalive me while I'm sitting here trying to figure out what potato I want for dinner. There's so many options. Do you ever have that issue where there's like so many options for like one thing and it's a little bit overwhelming because it's just like, you know, yeah, there's just a lot. on it? Yeah, okay. There we go. Got that taken care of. Back to the craft. Monk. You know, I'm getting some free fence out of this too. Too lazy to pick my phone up, so I'm texting my stepdad back from my watch. And it is really hard to type on my watch. Sending message sent. Thank you. That's all I wanted you to do was send the message. Boom. Oh, look, there's a piece of charcoal in there. The way I break the chests, and I'll just take whatever's in them. But let's see. Ow. Jeez, yep. Trying to not interrupt things too much, but alas. What else can go away? Yeah, that's right. I have this thing. Duh. Okay, let's see if I can get the rest of this. Take it down before sunset. Didn't mean to fall off of it. Can I stop moving while I'm trying to break things? Like, dang. There we go. You know what? Finish it in the morning. Make it daylight. Okay, let's finish taking this thing down. gonna say, I could either preserve the village, or I could start kidnapping the villagers. And making make a little, like, containment area. So what do I need to make the sweet. I was like, what is that? And then I realized it was just my chests. Because I'm clearly smart and observant. Okay. Okay, listen. Listen, Jeff. My posture is... That's... I straightened it up a little bit. And got it up a little bit. Instead of slinking, I start to, like, slink downwards. Okay. Oh, because those are trap chests. Anyways, just get this stuff out of not you. I'm gonna put over here by this one. So I have 2 of those. What's I even working on? Oh yeah, I was gonna cut down trees. I'll go cut down these trees. Yeah, I'll go to this side of the village. Cut you down soon. Cut it down from the top up. That was all the saplings were gonna give me for that one, really? Okay. Hi, Tumper. The Tumper baby is sleeping. But, shockingly, for once, he's not. Not self-promo, but kind of. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. I gotta use this dirt. I did not want to put a torch down there. Yes. I'm playing Dungeons, Dragons, and Space Shuttles. To be specific. You have a mod pack? I did not know you had a mod pack. Send me the link on Discord, and I will check it out. Because I've been looking for a new one to do a YouTube series on. So yes, shoot me it on Discord, and I'll load it up next time I open Minecraft. Which I say that like it's going to be ages before I open Minecraft again, when I know full well it's probably going to be later tonight when I should be doing homework. But you know. But yeah, I didn't know you had a mod pack. That's cool. I've always wanted to, like, make one, or, like, have someone who knows how to, like, tweak the things, and have them, like, make me one that's, like, specific to me. Because, like, you know, like, Direwolf has his own, like, mod packs, and he does his own series of stuff like that. Like, I want something like that. And I'm so easy to please, because as long as it has, like, immersive engineering, mechanism, Ham's Hardest Craft, and mystical agriculture, I'm like, I'm set. Because those are my favorite mods. I just want this tree to come down. Oh my. We done? Good. Tree down, tree down. Collect all the wood. There, there. Why did that stick take so long? Why did that take so long to break? That was weird. Doesn't usually take that long. Oh, this time I'm gonna make a dirt tower to get this one. Boom, boom, boom. You know, I'm like hyper aware of like my posture now, and it's like I can feel myself like slinking down, but I know it's also because I have my chair back, like leaned back, just because it's more comfortable to sit on the chair. Thumper, I don't need you judging me. If I got bad posture, you got worse posture. I've seen the way you sleep. Don't know why I'm trash talking my rabbit right now, but that's a large portion of what my life has become, is trash talking my rabbit. It's been a long summer, but it is nice to not be moving to a new place every few days. I think like the longest we ever really like stopped anywhere all summer is we spent 2 weeks in Salt Lake and we spent 2 weeks in Detroit. Other than that, everything was like 7 days or shorter. It was just exhausting summer, and I'm just happy to be in one place. Ow! That was rude. The tree was just like, nope, I'm done. Ooh, there's more clay here too, cool. Okay, I will check it out when I'm probably gonna have to end here in a little bit anyways, because dinner will be home soon. And I am hungry, and I am ready to destroy some baked potatoes. I was trying to jump on that tree. Let's try this again. Let me do this. Maybe that'll help me jump onto it. There. Really? Did I suddenly just forget how to play Minecraft? There we go. I made it. Yeah, earlier on in my stream, my friend actually like manifested a couple villages showing up, but neither of them had the immersive engineering building, which is like my I need it because I like ganking the so it's how I get my started on the treated planks and stuff, because I just feel run the building, you know? Work smarter, not harder. But I finally found a village that had one, and of course a meteor spawned in the blacksmith, and it didn't spawn a chest. And that usually has some nice loot. Okay, there's that. Pick up everything that dropped. But yeah, so I got a village over there. It's have an apple just so I can freaking run. I still can't run. There we go. Have an apple so I can jog. So yeah, I got a village like right over there, and I'm just kind of like taking up his spot like right here because I can. Keep all the stuff out of my inventory. Okay, that. Okay, good enough. That's gonna be for traveling. Okay, so what was I doing now? I was getting that wood because I need to make some charcoal briquettes. Okay, so I was like 6, 7, 8. Actually, that way. Where's the charcoal at? There it is. 1, 2. 2 should It's 8 things per piece of coal. 26, 27, and it's sunset. See, that's a tricky thing because I love building, but I'm not good at it. Like, I'm awful at it. I'm that type where, like, I have friends that will make these, like, glorious mansions, and I'm there with a little dirt hut. Because that's about the limit of... I don't know if it's the limit of my skills, or if it's, like, the, limit of, like, my ADHD, and I just lose patience and attention span. Just wanted 4 of them, right? Yeah. 4 of those, 2 charcoal. Boom. Charcoal, charcoal. Give me the noise, thank you. Yeah, I got 10 coal. I got 41 coal. Oh, look, I had a charcoal in there. I didn't know I had a charcoal in there. Sup, little dude. I may kill you later. For food. The block of coal. Let's... Where did I put all that clay? Just do this simply for now, and I'll probably do grinding off stream. Maybe. I don't know. I'm gonna take the sawdust. Okay, so sand. Okay. Sand. Sand. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 sand, 1 clay. That. My builder builds for me. Ooh. Ooh, I like that. Yeah, let me, as a matter of fact, yes, I trust the curse forge links. Okay, let's see. Mine colonies. You want to build your own prosperous city, a walled fortress, a Nordic village. Ooh. Small fishing town, metropolis of your dreams. Mayor Jeff's mine colonies with 180 mods. Nice. Okay, so this is basically, it's like, okay, I like that it's like focused on the building. What do you got in it? You got, ooh, the dungeons, biomes of plenty is always a good one to have. Cooking for blockheads is a fun one. Like, I like cooking for blockheads. What else do we get? Nice. This is a really good looking pack. Like, you got a lot of... I love the Macaw's mod. I love the Macaw's packs, like the mods or whatever, like all the building. That's where it's at. Ooh, it's got all the Pan's Harvest Craft in it. Very nice. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna add that to my stuff. I like the looks of that pack. This is a good one. What was I doing? Oh yeah, I was making this. I got completely distracted. There we go. There's my sandy coal compound. Okay, need more sawdust. That's done. Actually. Yeah, loophole. Cool, so it'll be when I download stuff after dinner and everything, it'll be all ready to go. I'm excited to try it out. Why do I keep, like, I look at the quest book and I decide on what route I'm gonna go, and then I completely forget what I'm gonna be doing. that. What other food do I have? Do I have any, like, good, like, oomph boosting foods? No, I don't. Of course I don't. Because it's not Dungeons and Dragons and Space Shuttles if I don't accidentally almost starve myself. Okay, now, that's not what have I got? I don't have any bushes. Okay, well, I do not want to put some of those down. Put some of those down, so let's, 1, 2, 3. So there's that for olives, and then the right spot. No, I didn't. Be right there, there, and there, just to get some more wood. Okay, so I got that. I think it wants 10 copper, but I got that copper. And I thought I had other copper, but I guess I don't. Good thing that's... Okay, there's that copper. Back. Yeah, more copper ingots. Oh, that's right, now I'm gonna make this stuff too. Okay, so I need saw, mortar, chisel, other thing. Where's my string? I had string. I swear I had string. Okay, well, you know what? Not you, you. Okay, that's gonna bug me. Over here. Just do that. Like, I could have sworn I had. Wool chain. Take some iron. Ugh. Why? I gotta be so rude. Stop. I don't have the means to make that, so okay. Waiting on cotton it is. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna do this the easy way. Okay, so there's my saw. There's my chisel. Oh, I gotta get this. Duh, staring me in the face. Okay, and my mortar. So I got those. So once the vanilla cobblestone, I could get the bone meal. Copper axe. Just do that. That's right, I don't have bones anymore because I fed it to wolves that I then lost. Because I did not think it through. However, I can do 7. Let's just do this. Bam, bam, bam. Since we're gonna need it anyways. Do that. Sleep through the night. Daylight. I don't know what the heck just happened to my voice there. Wow. That was... We're good. Okay. I'm gonna need a black lotus. And I know there's one around here somewhere. I remember seeing it. There it is. Bonk. Wee. Jump, 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 jump. Okay. So that's gonna be after the bone meal. The wood, if I could get my voice to cooperate here. It is not used to talking this much. There we go. That stuff done. Okay. I don't know why I made the axe when I needed to make the other things. I was not paying attention. So sword. Let's... I don't want shovel, pickaxe, sword. Okay. Shovel, pickaxe, sword. And then it'll give me another copper axe. This is why you read when there's quests. Make sure to read what you're doing. I want birch saplings, just cause. Ooh, as much. You know what? I'm gonna take the loot pad. Why not? I'll live a little. Let's see what's in those loot bags. I need to clear out my inventory. Shocking no one that I have like the world's worst inventory management skills. Yeah, common loot bag just has some torches. Legendary has freebies bow of doom? Nice. I don't even use bows, but nice. Enchanted scroll of feather falling. I will hold on to that. Put that away, put that away. Actually, I don't want to eat that. Eat that right now. Yeah, it is. Okay. Then it's like this and this right here. And that. There we go. I want the creeper wings because I need more food. I'm gonna need more food. I'm saying I always need food. Ridiculous how much. Okay, so this. You know what? I'm gonna go for this up here. Some sapling. It wants 2 apple saplings. Okay. Where to put my apples? They were in my inventory because I was not paying attention. 2 apple trees, and y'all are gonna go there and there. And I want no, walnut sapling. You're gonna go 1, 2, 3. Boom, there. 1, 2, 3. Yes. That. Okay, wheat seeds and rice seeds. I got plenty of both of those. Suppose I'd be my rice up too. Rice. wheat. Oh look, more rice seeds. As a matter of fact, let's go over here. And yeah, like these are the things that I want to build the walls out of. These the natura raspberry bushes and blueberry bushes and whatever other airy bushes. I love these potatoes. Like, I know it's gonna give me potatoes at some point, but like, I'm like, why are you following me? Because I got wheat in my hand. I didn't mean to break the carrot, but here I am. Any more potatoes? Yes, there is. What are you? There's sage. Let's see. No potatoes in this one, right? And no, that's just carrots, wheat, beets. Potatoes. Okay, I think this. Oh, potatoes. That's what I'm talking about. Bunch of potatoes. Ooh, my olive trees grew. Well, two of them did. Okay, I got that. This rice dough is essentially this. Do 20 and Ow. Okay, so it's that rice bread. It's that. Just stay there. That wasn't what I wanted to do, but it's a good source of food. There, go there. Thank you. Look at inventory. So, you know what? I got more chests. Just. Except I want you to stay in my inventory. You stay. You. I know where I can put you guys. You guys go right there. Okay. I want the loot bags. I got enough pumpkins. I want garlic seeds. No, I want chili pepper seeds. Take the chili pepper seeds. Mineral wood and some milk. That's not what I did. No, stop clicking that one, brain. I want the bone meal back. Okay, 4 sugar canes. Got 21, so hot. And I got bone meal. And I got the Black Lotus. So that should complete a couple things. Okay, so sugarcane, I'm gonna take the chests. Grab that reward. Grab that reward. Ugh. My sinuses are achy. You know, I just realized I'm gonna have to actually make sandstone. Because all the running around I didn't think to, like, you know, make some. Or pick some up. So let's see, sand. I'll need 4, but I got 8, and I'm taking the loot bag. I'll see if I get lucky. What do we got? Calcium. And I see alchemistry stuff. I've never reached the point in this game where I actually touch the alchemistry stuff. Like, maybe this will be new. Okay, so got that. I have to do place shears. Do that. Do that. And then I'm gonna need wool. Get that. I want the lamb, but I'm not gonna use it yet. This bed part's gonna be easy. For the fact that I don't have just that. Bed. And sleep through the night. Okay, let's grab the reward for that. Clay bucket. I forgot how to make the clay bucket. Is it still just the 3 clay? No, it's 5, okay. Not that. Whee. Boom. Well, that's doing that. We got... I'm not gonna have to make a weak blood orb. Ooh, 3 emeralds. That's the pants. The paint's one. There's my clay bucket. Then it wants to water. Which was shockingly one of the easiest things. I want the loot bag. Okay, that's right. I need to... I only have 5 sand. Yeah, I can fix that. Run. As fast as I can. Just gathering up some sand. Here we go. Do that. So then I'm also going to need wood. Okay, yeah, just the glass and wood. Okay. Waiting on the glass. One, two, three, four, 5, 6, 7 glass. Okay, 4 more need to cook. What can I do while I wait? Bricks. I'm gonna go get bricks. Boing. Could have sworn there were actual bricks here. But maybe I'm just losing my mind. It wouldn't be the first time I forget how things work. Fine then. Gotta remind myself that I don't need to actually grow rubber trees. Because I just got that whole little, like, farm of them right there. that. Boom. We got our wood tank. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna make a couple of the. No, I'm not, because I don't have enough glass at the moment. Okay, so I got that. Plus 2 bricks. That's gonna take a while. I really don't have any bricks, so. Oh, look at that. That was like a loophole. Okay, more paper. No, I know. No, I know I found some. I could have sworn I had found some. Either that or I'm just confusing this playthrough for yet another world that I have here. So I guess I'm making some paper. Suitcase and some slats. Okay. Okay, I got my saw. I got my sandstone. Sugar cane. Yeah, good enough. That, and then what's the rice? Slim balls. I didn't cook all my rice dough, right? I didn't cook all my rice dough, right? I mean, I got rice. Should I really cook all my rice dough? Okay, fine. Technically, I just need 4 and 4. Actually, I do 8. No. 8 is. Boom. And boom. So then I do this, this. And that. There's some rice slime balls. I'm gonna need string, and I don't have string yet. Good enough. Looks like one of those. I should have 5 more there, so that'll make. I think I get 4 string. Yeah. Okay. Throwing torches, string, slime, 2 torches. Why am I freaking out with that when I get 1, 2? How did? Okay, 2, 4. So that. The rollable torches. Not what I wanted to do. I did not want to throw it. I was trying to open the chest. Oh, look at that. That's right. That gave me more. And it's just my way across there just to have some space. Okay, the rough brownstone is clay, gravel, and sandstone. I have to make more sandstone. Do I have more sand? I was like, yeah, I went and got more sand, right? Like, thought I had more sand. Good thing I did. Okay, so I'm gonna need that, and where are you hiding? There you are. So it wants gravel. Actually, first I have to make the sandstone. Boom, 3 of those. that. I only wanted 4 of those for the quest, right? Yes, okay. And it gives me 4 more. Olives! Oh boy, do I have olives. Got 23 olives. And then that's just the 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 paper. Do I still have my paper on me? No, I put it in the chest, didn't I? Yes, I did. There we go. Got one of the quests chains completed. Or not completed, like one of the quest chains opened up. Yeah, why are you throwing stuff over there, dude? Can you not? Okay, let's get some loot bag. Don't care, don't care. Just get this stuff out of my inventory. Look, more throwing torches. Do I have any more loot bags? No, that was all the loot bags, right? Yeah, I think. Maybe. I think so. But anyways, I'm gonna end it here. And I'll probably be back tomorrow with more of Dungeons, Dragons, and Space Shuttles. And, I'm gonna send you guys over to, is Sunshine still up? Yes, he is. I'm gonna send you guys to Sunshine, who's playing Fallout 76. And I will see you guys next time. And thank you for joining me on my, adventure back into streaming after such a long time. And we'll see you guys next time.